People like him don't make billion-dollar deals. Remove him now. Victoria Hayes said it loud enough for the marble steps to echo. Her white gown shimmered under the golden chandeliers, diamonds catching every flash of paparazzi. The sentence wasn't just dismissal, it was judgment, delivered like policy. Guests froze. A few chuckled. Phones tilted upward, ready to catch the scene. The man she pointed at, Darius Cole, stood in a plain black suit. No designer watch, no entourage, no visible power. Just calm eyes and a posture that refused to bend. He had been called worse. At 25, a dreamer, unworthy of credit. At 38, a mistake at a hotel desk. And now, at 48, the same verdict in a different accent. You don't belong here. Victoria tilted her champagne glass, voice honeyed but edged with steel. This is the Dealmaker's Gala. Private. Exclusive. You can't just walk in and pretend you're someone. The word pretend hung in the air like smoke. Darius lifted his phone, screen glowing with the gold-lettered banner. The Dealmaker's Gala VIP Access. He held it steady, silent. Victoria didn't even glance at it. She snapped her fingers toward security. Escort him off the premises. The guard, Ethan, shifted uneasily. The man in front of him didn't look like a gate crasher. He looked anchored, as if the carpet rolled out for him alone. But Victoria's voice was sharp, and her gown carried authority like armor. A whisper cut through the crowd. Lena, a young cocktail server, balancing a silver tray, spoke without thinking. I saw his name earlier, on the list. Her eyes flicked nervously toward Victoria. The smile on Victoria's face didn't move, but her tone turned venomous. Stay in your lane, sweetheart. You're not paid to question guests. The air grew thick. Phones kept rising. A woman in a red cocktail dress muttered, This feels wrong. Beside her, another guest whispered, Then why does he look so calm? Because Darius had no need to shout. Not yet. Silence was his armor. Time was his weapon. And in minutes, the same woman laughing at him in her gown would be stripped of every contract she thought made her untouchable. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Darius. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. The guard, Ethan, said it quietly, almost apologetically, but Victoria made sure the command echoed. She lifted her chin, white gown glowing under the chandelier, every diamond a silent exclamation mark. Guests around the entrance hushed, waiting for the scene to play out like theater. Darius didn't move. His phone with the invitation still glowed in his hand, steady as a stone. His silence unnerved Ethan more than any protest would have. Victoria's smile sharpened. This isn't personal, it's policy. We can't let someone dressed modestly walk into a room full of billion-dollar investors. She dragged out the word modestly as though it were an offense. Laughter rippled through the crowd, a sound that stung sharper than the words. From the side, Chloe Morgan, the young black designer clutching her clutch bag, took a step forward. Her voice cracked but carried, He's not the problem here. The problem is you. Phones lifted higher. Murmurs swept through the guests like a shifting tide. A man in a navy tux muttered, Is this really happening? At this level? Another whispered, Don't film too much. They'll throw you out too. Victoria turned her attention back to Darius, ignoring the voices. If you truly belong here, prove it. Right here. Right now. Her words weren't procedural, they were taunts. Darius finally spoke, his voice low and measured. Run my name. Victoria scoffed. We don't run names at the door. That's for staff. And you? She gestured with her champagne glass, careful not to spill a drop. You don't look like staff, and you certainly don't look like a guest. The air tightened. Ethan shifted on his feet. Lena, still holding her tray of cocktails, whispered, He was on the list. I swear he was. But she spoke too softly, drowned by the swell of voices around her. Then came the escalation. Victoria's tone hardened, slicing through the murmurs. Escort him out now. I won't repeat myself. The command landed heavy. Ethan reached out, uncertain, as if touching Darius would ignite something he couldn't control. Guests leaned closer, phones raised higher. The marble steps no longer felt like an entrance, they felt like a courtroom. Darius didn't step back. He didn't flinch. He let the silence linger until it grew uncomfortable, until the weight of it forced every witness to wonder, why isn't he moving? Why does he look so certain? Because he wasn't there to argue. He was there to let them reveal themselves. And in that moment, they already had. Why is he still standing here? Victoria's voice cut through the marble foyer like broken glass. She raised her chin, the white gown shimmering under the lights as though her outfit alone proved authority. This gala is not for experiments. Escort him out. Ethan froze. His hand hovered inches from Darius's arm. He couldn't explain why he hesitated, only that the man in the black suit looked like someone who belonged more than anyone else here. The silence felt dangerous. Darius didn't blink. His stillness pulled the whole room tighter. Guests shifted, murmuring. Phones hovered high. One man whispered, "This is about to explode." Victoria smiled thinly, feeding off the attention. "Do you hear me? He's pretending. This is fraud. If we allow one fake investor in, what happens next? Do we open the doors to every con artist on Wilshire?" She gestured at Darius as though his very presence threatened the marble underfoot. A ripple of gasps rolled through the guests. Chloe Morgan stepped forward again, voice stronger this time. "Stop. He hasn't done a thing but stand there. You're humiliating him for sport." Victoria's laughter rang sharp, rehearsed. "Sweetheart, humiliation requires credibility, and he has none." That was the moment it shifted. A gray-haired gentleman in a navy tux muttered to his companion, "He looks familiar. I've seen his face before." Another guest pulled out her phone, scrolling furiously. "Wait, isn't that?" Victoria's eyes flicked toward them, then back to Darius. She doubled down, louder now. "Security! He's trespassing. If he doesn't leave this instant, call the police. M." The words "call the police" detonated in the air. The crowd stiffened. Phones steadied. Nobody moved, but everyone understood the weight of escalation. Ethan swallowed hard. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" Victoria snapped, "Do your job." And then, finally, Darius spoke. Not loud, but with the kind of precision that cut deeper than volume. "Every word you've said is already logged." The foyer went silent. He lowered his phone slightly, voice steady. "The problem isn't that you don't recognize me. The problem is how you treat someone you think doesn't matter." For the first time, Victoria's smile faltered. Guests glanced between them, the tide shifting almost imperceptibly. Chloe whispered, "That's power without raising your voice." And Darius stayed still, calm as stone, letting the weight of his words sink into the marble floor beneath their feet. "He's a fraud." Victoria's words cracked across the foyer like a gavel. Guests gasped. Champagne flutes trembled in midair. The accusation wasn't just loud, it was intentional, designed to burn into the phones now recording from every angle. Ethan flinched. His hand fell back to his side. Calling someone a fraud in this room wasn't a statement, it was a sentence. Darius stood steady. The glow from his phone illuminated his calm expression, unmoved by the insult. He'd heard it before. At 23, when a banker froze his account after his first six-figure deposit. At 26, when a lender called him high risk, despite more collateral than anyone else. Now, decades and billions later, the same word returned like an old enemy. Fraud. Victoria circled him slightly, voice rising with each phrase. "Look at him. No entourage. No watch worth mentioning. No name anyone here recognizes. Does that sound like a man tied to billion-dollar deals, or does it sound like a scam?" Her audience shifted. Some nodded reluctantly. Others frowned. Chloe's voice cut through. "This is foul." Victoria turned on her, smile razor sharp. "Careful. Guilt by association spreads fast in this town." The tension thickened. Guests whispered, "Is he really a guest? What if she's right? What if he's not?" Darius finally lifted his head, eyes meeting Victoria's. His voice was cool, deliberate. "Run my name." Victoria scoffed, shaking her head as if brushing off a child. "You're not verified. You're not even on the list. This isn't a walk-in buffet. This is the deal-maker's gala." Lena, clutching her silver tray tighter now, whispered louder than she meant to, "He was on the list. I saw it this morning." Dozens of eyes turned toward her. She froze, cheeks flushing, but didn't back down. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret that." The guard, Ethan, shifted again. His loyalty cracked under the weight of the silence pressing down on him. "Ma'am, maybe we should check." "No," Victoria snapped. Her voice thundered, fueled by panic disguised as poise. "He doesn't belong here. Remove him now." And that was when Darius made the call. He raised his phone, pressed one button, and spoke 3 words. Initiate Protocol 6. The words weren't shouted. They were steady, surgical, but they hit the crowd harder than any scream. Murmurs surged. Guests looked at each other, confused. Protocol? What protocol? Victoria scoffed, desperate to regain ground. Empty threats, corporate jargon. You don't scare me. Darius didn't blink. Not yet. The foyer fell into a silence so heavy, it felt like marble itself was holding its breath. Protocol? Victoria let out a sharp laugh, tilting her champagne glass just enough to spill a drop onto the marble. This man thinks he's in a spy movie. He's not. He's trespassing. And when the police arrive, protocol won't save him. Her words rippled through the crowd like static. Some laughed nervously, others froze. Ethan, the guard, didn't laugh at all. He studied Darius with unease, the way you study someone who knows more than they're saying. Darius's phone stayed steady in his hand, his voice calm. Time. Stamped this moment. On the other end, an unseen voice responded, crisp and immediate. Logged. Gasps broke out. Someone whispered, "He's recording everything." Victoria's smile faltered, but she pressed on, louder, trying to drown the room. Recording what? A trespass? A fraud? Go ahead. You'll have plenty of footage to review in a holding cell. Chloe stepped forward, defiant now. He's not a fraud. You're just hoping your arrogance blinds everyone long enough to believe it. Victoria turned, eyes narrowing like blades. And who are you to speak? A guest who barely made the list? Careful, darling. In this world, one wrong association costs everything. Phones kept rising. One man muttered, "This is going to blow up online." Another whispered, "That guy looks familiar. I swear I've seen him in Forbes." Victoria heard the murmurs, panicked behind her polished mask. She gestured sharply. "Ethan! Now!" The guard hesitated again. "Ma'am, with respect." "Do your job," she snapped. Ethan's hand hovered inches from Darius's shoulder. The silence deepened. Guests held their breath. A woman whispered, "Why isn't he moving?" Another answered, "Because he doesn't have to." And Darius finally spoke, voice steady, words sharp as steel. "Touch me, and this entire event collapses before dessert is served." The room froze. Phones tilted higher. Even the band inside the ballroom faltered, the faint notes of jazz slipping into silence. Victoria scoffed, trying to laugh, but her voice shook. "You don't have that kind of power." Darius's eyes never left hers. "Watch me." The weight of his words pressed into the marble, into the chandelier light, into every guest's phone recording the moment. And for the first time, Victoria Hayes, radiant in her white gown, looked small. Enough. Victoria's voice cracked through the foyer like thunder. Her hand sliced the air, champagne glass trembling but still raised like a weapon. "This man is not who he says he is an imposter, a scammer, and I will not let him embarrass this gala." The accusation landed heavy, almost theatrical. Guests gasped. Phones angled higher, recording every syllable. The foyer was no longer an entrance, it was a stage, and Victoria was performing for her survival. Ethan froze again, eyes darting between the woman in white and the man in black. He had followed orders before, but something in Darius's stillness made his hand feel like it weighed 100 pounds. Darius didn't flinch. His voice came low, deliberate. "Every lie you speak only makes the truth sharper." The words cut cleaner than any outburst. A murmur swept the crowd. Someone whispered, "That's not how a fraud talks." Another replied, "That's how someone in control talks." Victoria laughed, brittle now. "Control? Look around. You're standing on marble you don't own, in a suit that doesn't belong in this room. You think silence makes you powerful? Silence only proves you're nothing." That was when Lena finally stepped forward. Tray of cocktails still balanced in her trembling hands. She spoke louder than before, her voice breaking but clear. "His name was on the list. I saw it. Early this morning." Gasps erupted. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Phones zoomed in. Victoria's face hardened, the mask slipping. "You're mistaken." "No," Lena said, firmer now. "I remember the name, Darius Cole. It was there, and then it was gone." The crowd stirred, restless, murmurs building like a tide. Chloe added from across the steps, "She's right. Something doesn't add up here, and we're all watching. Victoria's veneer cracked. Do you understand what you're risking? She hissed. One mistake and you'll never work in this city again. But it was too late. The tide had shifted. Darius lifted his phone again, his calm unshaken. Log the witness testimony. The same crisp voice answered instantly. Logged. Silence fell heavy. For the first time, Victoria's confidence slipped into visible panic. Her eyes darted across the foyer, searching for allies, but the crowd was no longer hers. And Darius stood exactly where he had started, anchored, immovable, letting them all unravel themselves. Do you people seriously not see it? Victoria's voice rang sharp, dripping with fury disguised as elegance. She spread her arms, white gown glittering like armor under the lights. He's a nobody, a con in a cheap suit, trying to sneak into circles he'll never belong to. The words cracked through the foyer like a whip. Phones recorded. Guests flinched. Chloe's jaw tightened. Ethan's hand balled into a fist, unsure where to place his loyalty. Darius didn't move. He simply let the insult hang in the air. Heavy, toxic, undeniable. Victoria leaned closer, smile venomous. Men like him don't make billion-dollar deals. Men like him beg to be noticed. She let the champagne glass dangle from her fingers, as if she were holding the evidence of his unworthiness. Gasps spread. Murmurs thickened. One guest whispered, "That was too far." Another muttered, "She's going to regret this." Lena's voice broke the tension. He's not begging. He hasn't raised his voice once. Look at him. Her tray trembled in her hands, but her eyes burned steady. Victoria snapped toward her. Enough. Do your job, or you'll never serve another guest in this city. But the cracks were visible now. A middle-aged man in a tux whispered loudly to his wife, "This doesn't feel like security protocol. This feels like profiling." His wife nodded, clutching her clutch tighter. Ethan finally stepped closer, hand reaching for Darius's shoulder. The crowd held its breath. Every phone tilted higher. Darius didn't flinch. He spoke evenly, each syllable deliberate. "If you touch me, the contracts you protect vanish before midnight." Ethan froze. His hand hovered midair. He pulled it back slowly, the weight of uncertainty pressing harder than any command. The silence stretched, broken only by Victoria's laugh, shrill now, desperate. "Contracts? Please. You're bluffing. If you had real power, you wouldn't be standing out here like a stray." Her words rippled like poison, but the faces around her shifted. Doubt spread, not toward Darius, but toward her. And for the first time, it wasn't Darius being judged. It was Victoria Hayes, the woman in white, unraveling in front of 100 witnesses. Darius lowered his phone, his voice calm as stone. "Your mistake isn't calling me nothing. Your mistake is doing it in front of everyone." The foyer fell silent again, a silence so sharp it felt like judgment itself. The crowd was no longer buzzing, it was holding its breath. Darius lifted his phone higher, pressing a single icon with calm precision. His voice carried, low but unshakable. "Rachel, log this incident. Escalate to board protocol. Priority 1. The response came instantly, crisp and cutting through the marble air. "Logged. Board has been notified. Confirmation in progress." Murmurs erupted. Guests shifted uneasily. Someone whispered, "Board? Which board?" Another, already filming, muttered, "This is bigger than her." Victoria forced a laugh, brittle as glass. "Board protocol? What board would answer to you? You're wasting everyone's time." Her voice trembled beneath the veneer of poise, but she lifted her glass anyway, as if to toast his downfall. Darius didn't answer her. He didn't need to. He turned slightly, scanning the faces in the crowd, his calm, a stark contrast to her frantic performance. "Every second is being recorded," he said quietly, but the words carried like a verdict. "Every witness matters." Lena tightened her grip on her tray. "Then let it be recorded," she said, louder this time. "He belongs here." Gasps. Phones caught her declaration from every angle. Chloe nodded sharply, adding, "And we all see how you've treated him." Victoria spun on them, her mask slipping further. "You two don't know what you're talking about. He's lying. He's playing you." But the tide had shifted. The doubt wasn't on Darius anymore. It was crawling up her gown, coiling around her diamonds, stripping her voice of its authority. The guard, Ethan, stepped back, hands raised slightly as if refusing to take another order. "Ma'am," he muttered, "I think we should wait." Victoria's eyes widened, panic flashing through her smile. "Wait? Wait for what? He's nobody. And that was when the phone in Darius's hand chimed. A single, distinct notification. He raised it so the screen glowed against his face, the words visible to anyone near enough to see. Board, convened, status live. The silence deepened, electric now. Guests leaned forward, hungry for the reveal. A woman in a sequined dress whispered, "Is this real?" A man beside her whispered back, "Feels too real not to be." Victoria tried to laugh again, but no sound came. Darius lowered the phone, his expression calm, his voice sharper than any blade. "You wanted proof. You're about to get more than you can handle." The foyer was no longer her stage. It belonged to him. The marble foyer pulsed with silence. Every eye was on the glowing words on Darius's phone. Board, convened, status live. Victoria's smile had frozen into something brittle, her glass of champagne trembling just enough to betray her. "Board convened?" she scoffed, but her voice cracked. "Do you really expect us to believe?" She didn't finish, because at that exact moment, the phone spoke again. A voice, crisp and unmistakably corporate, rang through the speaker. "Mr. Cole, the board is online. All directors present. Standing by for your instruction." Gasps tore through the crowd. Champagne glasses clinked against marble as hands fumbled. Someone whispered, "He called him Mr. Cole." Another voice, low and urgent, "Darius Cole, the investor?" Phones zoomed closer, recording every detail. Hashtags were already forming in whispers. Number gala scandal. Number Cole revealed. Victoria's mask cracked. "No, this is a trick. He's staging this." Her words were too fast, too thin. She turned desperately to Ethan. "Shut it down. Take the phone." But Ethan didn't move. His hands stayed at his sides, eyes locked on Darius with dawning recognition. Darius lowered the phone slightly, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. Calm, controlled, every syllable measured. "You've asked who I am. You've doubted what you cannot see. So let me make it clear." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it quivered. Then, with the quiet authority of someone who had built empires, he said, "I am Darius Cole, CEO of Cole Global, the primary partner in the $5 billion acquisition this gala is celebrating tonight." The foyer erupted gasps, murmurs, a collective intake of breath that shook the chandelier above. Chloe covered her mouth. Lena's tray rattled in her trembling hands. Guests turned to each other in shock. One older man in a tux whispered, "My God, he is the deal." Phones caught everything, the panic in Victoria's eyes, the stillness in Darius's posture, the ripple of realization spreading like fire. Victoria tried to recover, her voice shrill now. "No, he's lying, this isn't possible." But her words drowned beneath the crowd. Someone shouted, "He's the reason we're here." Another added, "She tried to throw him out of his own deal." The tide was irreversible. The woman in white was unraveling in front of 100 witnesses, and the man she called a fraud stood immovable, the true center of the gala. And for the first time that night, Victoria Hayes looked less like the gatekeeper and more like the trespasser. The chandelier trembled with the weight of silence. For a moment, the marble foyer was frozen, phones raised, eyes wide, breaths held. Then the flood hit. Guests surged with whispers, shock turning into outrage. "She tried to throw him out. He's the deal. He is the deal." Victoria staggered back a step, the stem of her champagne glass trembling in her hand. The white gown that had shimmered like power now looked pale against the gravity pressing down on her. "No," she stammered. "He's bluffing. This is staged. It has to be." But Darius didn't waste a breath. His voice was low, deliberate, and it carried like stone rolling downhill. "Rachel, confirm status." The phone answered instantly. "Board confirms Mr. Cole as principal authority. All contracts under review. Authorization ready." Gasps erupted again, sharper now, cutting through the crowd. A man in a tux muttered, "It's real. It's actually real." Another said, "She tried to humiliate the investor behind the deal. She's finished." Victoria's mask shattered. "Stop listening to him," she cried, her voice shrill, brittle. "This man doesn't control anything." "Terminate her credentials," Darius said, calm as steel. The foyer fell dead silent. Rachel's voice rang through the speaker. "Confirmed. Victoria Hayes, event manager, credentials revoked, access terminated. Effective immediately." It was a digital execution. The crowd gasped as Victoria's phone buzzed violently in her clutch. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. Her event dashboard flashed red. Access denied. Her tablet behind the podium lit up with the same warning. Locked out. In front of everyone. The gasp became applause sharp, scattered at first, then rolling into something louder. Guests weren't clapping for cruelty. They were clapping for justice. Victoria's face drained of color. Her gown, once radiant, now felt like a costume stripped of meaning. She whispered, broken, "You can't do this." But Darius's eyes met hers, steady and merciless. "I already did." Phones caught every angle, the collapse of her power, the calm of his. Chloe whispered to Lena. He didn't even raise his voice. Lena nodded, eyes wide. He didn't need to. And in that moment, the man who had stood silent on the marble steps was no longer the outsider. He was the axis of the entire room. Victoria Hayes, in her glittering white gown, had just been erased from the very stage she thought she owned. The applause didn't stop. It grew louder, sharper, echoing off the marble like a verdict. Phones recorded every second. Victoria stood frozen, her white gown glowing like a spotlight turned cruel. Her hands shook around the useless phone that now displayed only one message. Access denied. Chloe broke the silence first, her voice steady and clear. You humiliated him in front of all of us. You tried to erase him, and now the truth erased you. Gasps spread, followed by nods. Guests began speaking out, voices layering one over another. A woman in sequins shook her head. I can't believe I laughed at your words a few minutes ago. A man in a tux added. She told us he was nothing. Turns out she's the one who's nothing. Lena clutched her tray tighter, then lifted her chin. I said his name was on the list. You ignored me. You ignored everyone. The crowd murmured in agreement. Ethan, the guard who had nearly carried out her orders, stepped forward and faced her. His voice was low but certain. You told me to throw him out. If I had touched him, I'd have been finished. You set me up. Phones swiveled toward him. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out. The mask was gone. What remained was panic, naked and raw. Darius didn't move. His silence anchored the storm, letting every voice in the room pile onto her collapse. He had no need to defend himself anymore. His presence did the speaking. One older guest, his hair silver and his tie slightly loosened, leaned into his wife. I know that name, he whispered. Darius Cole. Forbes cover. Private equity titan. He's the reason this acquisition even exists. His wife's eyes widened as she whispered back, and she tried to throw him out like trash. The whispers spread like wildfire. Cole Global. 5 billion. Owner. Investor. The murmurs weren't rumors anymore, they were fact, cemented by what everyone had just witnessed. Victoria's knees nearly buckled. She whispered, Please. It was a misunderstanding. But the crowd had already chosen. A young man near the front, phone held high, answered flatly, Number. It was arrogance. Darius finally spoke, voice calm, unshaken. The problem was never my name. The problem was your assumption. The foyer erupted in murmurs of agreement, some even clapping again. The narrative had shifted completely. Victoria Hayes, once the gatekeeper, was now the example her fall recorded from every angle. And Darius Cole stood at the center, silent but undeniable, the embodiment of a truth too heavy to ignore. The marble foyer was no longer a hallway, it was a courtroom, and the verdict had already been delivered. Victoria Hayes stood trembling in her white gown, stripped of the authority she had worn like a crown minutes earlier. Her phone still flashed, access denied in cruel red letters. The crowd surrounded her, not to protect, but to witness. Guests whispered, recorded, and shook their heads. She really tried to throw him out. Of his own deal. Unbelievable. Chloe stepped forward, voice steady. You told us he didn't matter. Tonight proved the opposite. Lena added, firmer than ever. You erased his name because of how he looked, but you can't erase what he built. Even Ethan, the guard, nodded slowly, shame in his eyes. If I'd followed through, I'd have been complicit. I won't forget this. The murmurs grew into something larger. Guests clapped, some softly, some loud and furious, their applause less about celebration and more about reckoning. And still, Darius Cole hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved more than a step since the night began. The silence he carried was heavier than any outburst. At last he spoke. His voice was low, deliberate, unshakable. "You wanted me gone. You called me a fraud. You laughed because you thought silence meant weakness." He paused, letting the words sink like stone in water. "But silence was patience. Silence was strength. Silence was me giving you enough rope to hang your own reputation." Gasps, murmurs, a wave of agreement. Phones tilted closer. Darius's gaze swept across the crowd. "The real problem isn't that you didn't know my name. The real problem is that you thought the man you didn't know was beneath you." Victoria's face drained of color. Her knees bent slightly as if the marble beneath her had finally given way. Darius turned from her, facing the witnesses, the guests who would carry this story into headlines, boardrooms, and whispered conversations for years. His final words landed with the weight of a closing gavel. "I don't need your cameras. I don't need your approval. I am the ending you'll never edit out." The foyer erupted applause, cheers, and the click of 100 cameras. Some clapped for justice, some for awe, but all for the undeniable truth they had just witnessed. Darius Cole walked forward, through the crowd that now parted for him, the man they had underestimated revealed as the very power they had gathered to honor. And behind him, in her white gown, Victoria Hayes stood shattered, an eternal reminder that arrogance built on prejudice collapses in the face of dignity.